And Tobias also talked a lot about the pilot purgatory. And I myself, I want to focus today with a short keynote on thinking about exactly this, about how we can actually overcome this purgatory, what we can learn from digital transformation in the past, and how we can actually create what I call a dual loop advantage for sustainable competitiveness, right? It is on the one hand to harvest the potential of upgrade circular economy, about prolonging the lifetime of a product by giving new functionalities to it during the lifetime, and on the other hand, how to harvest the potential of artificial intelligence. I'm going to do that to give you an overview of the idea within the next 20 minutes, and after that we're going to listen to some really interesting real-life success stories on how that worked out actually. So when we talk about circularity here, we're talking a lot about the higher R strategies, about remanufacturing, about refurbishment, etc. And when we look at the pure numbers about how investment has been rising within the last years, actually there is a real hype and real activity around this area. So there are a lot of startups, over 800 circular economy startups and initiatives that we can see. There's a lot of capital also going globally into this domain, over 150 billion US dollars within the last 5 years, which actually should give us a good starting point on where we should go on, right? But the activity and all the hype actually didn't work out to the impact we hope. So we are kind of trapped in the pilot purgatory, right? About not scaling those early stage initiatives, those startups, which personally makes me pretty sad, because I for once thought that we would be way far along in regard to circularity, in regard on how we can see this impact unfold. Because if we have a look at the impact, actually within the last years, the global circularity declined from 9.1% in 2018 to 6.9% in 2024, if we have a look at the circularity gap report from the Ellen MacArthur Foundation. And just to give you one brave example from, I think, a pilot case, which I personally thought was a pretty good idea, Miele upgrade, I love the wordplay or the pun there, where you could actually have as a service business model for your coffee machine and also for other white goods, where you could shortage your personal usage cycle instead of 20 years or however long a Miele normally lasts, to 6 months. So it's more of a rental system that's going on there. But unfortunately, this pilot, which was started, I think, in 2021, didn't overcome this pilot purgatory because at the end, the incentive for being sustainable and also on how the main business behind it, so the center of power, actually thought about how it was integrated, wasn't enough to scale the idea in order to also generate the impact that was promised. So at the moment, we have this massive capital inflows, we have the allocation of relevant resources within companies towards circularity, but we are repeating those mistakes from the clean tech bubble over and over again. A lot of hype, a lot of activity, a lot of resources put in, but the impact is actually falling short. And if we have a look behind it, that's like, why does it actually not work out? I think first of all, we need to step back one step and have a look at how we think about strategy, right? And I think as a quote here shows, that thinking about your persistency in a business is the ability to reinvent yourself or to invent the future, to stay dynamic, but also on the other hand, to be able to do the things efficiently. And that's what we call ambidexterity from a research point of view. So if we talk about how we want to have an infinite organization, we need to think about that, right? So the old way of doing strategy, a 10 years plan, and then executing it perfectly is not the way to go. We need to think about options. We need to test boldly and learn fast in order to stay ahead of this change. And as we saw with the keynote of Tobias, the adoption time is getting shorter and shorter. So it becomes more important over the time to also stay here. And if we have a look in this a little bit more deep, we have on the one hand the generating of new possibilities, which we call the exploration. So it is the idea of creating something totally new, about developing new knowledge, new partnerships to go into new business models in order to also think about opportunities and how to create them. And on the other hand, how to exploit it. How can we strengthen our core business with new technologies, but also how to explore efficiently once the field of exploration is identified. And what that means for organization is that we need to think about how our capabilities regarding innovation leadership, so exploring new potentials and operational excellence, here how to actually meet the needs very efficiently, can work together. And where we are currently standing in many points is that we are very reactive, right? We think about how to become more become more efficiently, and maybe we are even very efficient. But if we are only efficient over time in a market where the conditions are changing ever faster, it is not enough. We need to become a dual organization to become excellent in innovation leadership and operational leadership at the same time in order to achieve that, right? So that is the first dual loop, to be this dual organization. And on the other hand, we need to think about how we can go with the twin transition, the twin transformation hand in hand with this dual transformation. So the pure use of AI is on a long term not going to be enough. We need to think about how we can also get a sustainable transition ongoing, how we can foster the uptake of upgrade circular economy in order to enhance profitability within planetary boundaries. Because if there's not a planet in which we can do our economic, outlive our economic system, there's nothing to outlive anymore. So to summarize this slide, it is about the dual loop advantage. On the one hand, become a dual organization and mastering the dual transformation between sustainable and digital transformation at the same time. How can that work out? So from a research point of view, I want to introduce this framework where we think about, okay, what is the dominant strategy and motivation behind why we want to go into a new field, right? It can be for internal optimization of business processes. It could be for circular experimentation, new fields that we want to challenge, where we have an idea how it can work out, and also to build up totally new circular business areas and business models, which is on the right-hand side. But the question is, how do we tackle each of those categories from an organizational point of view? And here we have the possibility coming from internally building up a unit focusing on this twin transformation projects, about acquiring existing companies, starting new business, and cooperating with other companies without our own company. And there is no easy answer on what you should do. It totally depends on the subject, about the use case we are talking about, and the capability of the organization, whether to start it internally and optimize your internal business processes like that, or if you need to acquire a new company in order to bring those new knowledge in order to also give the push for the transformation that you may need within your company, because the skills, the knowledge, but also maybe the mindset is not here yet. And what we see from time to time when we have this core business in the middle, where also the power lays within, and we have those new units, whether it's internally and or also a new business or joint venture. There are certain frictions going to arise. How do you measure those new businesses? You can't use the measures you use for exploitation, for the exploration phase. And that's also why I would love to talk about successful examples on today's agenda. We're going to deep dive into a few. Of course, there are many more, and let's maybe get in touch to that afterwards. So maybe giving you two examples on where it worked pretty well. I don't know who of you know Encori. It is, I think, a very interesting company focusing on the reverse supply chain. So actually getting cores, and now I'm talking about used parts, from the field back into your reman centers. And Encori is actually a joint venture from BMW and Interzero. So Interzero is the total expert about circularity, about designing whole circular loops, and BMW, I think I don't need to explain it at all. So almost 10 years ago, they founded this joint venture in order to combine those expertise, because BMW was sure they needed to add up on the circularity perspective, Interzero focusing on automotive expertise and having a very great first domain on where to also apply those logics in the car manufacturing market. So, but starting from there many years ago, at the moment, Encori is doing a lot of consulting and development in the field of circular strategy and offering those services in order to get the cores back from the field. There are over 1 million parts per year actually, which are processed by Encori. So you could say it's also a stable new organization that was in the end enabled by this strategic partnership. And I think that's a very nice opportunity where you, or a very nice example where you can see how those matching or also complementary abilities come together to form Encori as a company. Another example I want to highlight today is Corvi. Corvi is also a new company which was actually coming from an entrepreneur perspective from Tchibo. So Tchibo thought about, okay, how are we going to build up our refurbished shop? What do we actually need? And when first thinking about it internally, they very quickly realized that this is not a problem that only Tchibo has itself, right? So they expanded into this new circular business model, this whole new field of doing resale as a service by actually founding Corvi. And this company is not only doing Tchibo's resale as a service, so offering the whole interface and managing the partners, but it's also offering it to other partners as well. So here we are talking, for example, about Princess Kinderwagen, which is, who doesn't know it, it's a very expensive Kinderwagen company within Germany. So where, I mean, it totally makes sense to refurbish those. They are super expensive, so we're talking more than 1,000 euros. You have a lot of features that you can actually upgrade within the first life cycle, maybe with your first child and then the second child. Maybe there are different longings from the children's, but also they buy it back, remanufacture it internally, and then bring it onto the market again. So the whole idea about Tchibo's refurbished shop was a total success, but also on how Corvi is now designed and offering their service, resale as a service, for different customers in different markets, right? So that is another very interesting example, I think, from our perspective, where a totally new revenue stream was established by this company. And I think there are so many more very, very interesting examples and highlights we can put into this framework. And I want to point out a couple of more. So in a couple of minutes, we are going to listen to Mark Goldschmidt from Rolls-Royce, who's talking about remanufacturing overhaul for them, how they have not only made it more efficient, how they digitize it, but also how to bring sustainability into this whole idea. He's going to take us on a journey about this whole development, and I'm really looking forward to that. We are also going to hear from Marlene about Core Expedia from ZF, which is a very interesting project focusing also on the core return from the field. We also listened to Coorvi and Cori. And furthermore, we are going to hear a little bit about how also the cooperation with other companies can help you to look to overcome your perspective from a very individual organizational perspective with those center corporations, which we talked about a little bit as well, and also benchmark studies. Just get in exchange with other people focusing on the digital and sustainable transformation, about focusing on Reman and also the application of artificial intelligence within Reman, but also within the shop floor. I think that's very valuable in order to get into the exchange to focus here. One further example I want to point out is actually here right around those doors. We have the Demonstrationsfabrik here in Aachen, or the demonstration factory, where we focus at the moment on a cooperation from Vonovia and Enercube in order to bring a new idea on how to supply buildings with heat into life, right? Where it's a very circular design for those heat pumps you can just plug and play into existing buildings. So that is also a very interesting project I want to paint out. So whenever you are in Aachen, just step by and we will give you a brief overview over the idea. So to summarize the impressions I gave, or what I tried to deliver to you, is that in order to master the dual loop advantage, it is becoming very important to develop into a dual organization. So to embrace the simultaneous digital and sustainable transformation, but also to embrace the idea of exploration and exploitation. So, and that is for me the most important part, because there are a lot of technical applications here which can help us to achieve also very feasible business cases, to maybe communicate it, but at some points those ideas of business cases, they don't fit into the given KPI structure of organizations, especially of big organizations, right? So in order to ensure that the right ideas are picked and also then scaled, we need to think about how we can strategically align the goals of the power center, of the core of the company, and those experimental fields. I think that is very important also in order, if you're gonna try to communicate your initiative within your companies, think about how does it benefit the core business, what are we going to achieve in this regard. So maybe the buyback program triggers a lot of new buyers because they don't have the used good in their hand anymore. Easy communication towards sale. In order to live this ambidexterity, is also important for leaders to ensure that they can actually be able to, on the one hand, be very efficient in the exploration, in the exploitation phase with a given business, but also have an idea about what KPIs, what goals should be in the exploration phase. That it's maybe not about the earnings, about maybe even revenue in the first 1 to 2 years, in order to overcome those organizational inconsistencies, those friction points I mentioned earlier. And I think that is a very tough challenge also for all the industry leaders out there. But first and foremost, to understand where you should start, it is important to see where you are, what your capabilities are, and identify those potential in order to start your journey as of today.
Gerrit, thank you so much for that inspiring talk. And I mean, for me, these are one of these talks where you think about, wow, that sounds like a very convincing strategy, especially the dual organization between efficiency and innovation, as you call it. And I always get the feeling like, well, that's probably something you should have started 3 to 5 years ago. Now, we are currently in a situation of economic downturn, and I'm sure you are discussing those strategies with leaders, with senior leaders. What do they tell you? What is the feedback you get on these frameworks?
Yeah, of course. I mean, at the moment, to be honest, if we think about building up new opportunities in the remain, in the upgrade circular economy field, it's actually pretty difficult, because the return of investment for those circularity projects, if your product is very long lasting, like Mila, I said 20 years, the first return is going to be in 20 years. Or at least the earliest in 10 years or 5 years. Mm-hmm. So it is kind of out of the scope from a lot of leaders at the moment, which I think personally, of course, it is a bit frustrating, but we see big differences between companies who are publicly traded and also family-owned companies like Miele, who are doing a great job in order to strategically approach the circular economy with a lot of research projects, but also starting new pilots here. Maybe the thing that I always try to convince of is that we don't need to start with the new outgoing products, right? Mm-hmm. We can also think about what do we do actually with the products which are already in the field, right? Mm-hmm. Start a brownfield approach. Why don't we buy back the cores which are in the field? And there are a lot of initiatives that we are currently seeing that are focusing more on generating revenue rather on a short time period compared to how long the products last, right?
Yeah, I can imagine. Now, when you're in a situation that you have that debate with a company that wants to go in that direction, and you have that framework, that metrics where there are multiple choices to be made, and you start that discussion together with you and with your team. So how does it work out? What are the first steps? What is it that the company needs to provide in order to get the discussions going?
Yeah. First of all, I think it is very important to understand where the company currently stands. So we're thinking about assessing a maturity in the dimensions of culture, of business model, about also the production systems and processes. So do I even have at least some small pilots where I can build up on? Is there already an organizational structure? Maybe also starting from the digital time back then. So a lot of digital units, you saw them spreading out everywhere. And I don't have an exact number, maybe we will tell later, but I would guess at least 70% of them are back into the core business again, right? How many digital units are either sold or are now integrated into other parts of the company once again? But if we assess this maturity, I think starting from there, it's important to understand the DNA of the company. Yeah. Because you need to take the company with you on this transition. So it's a very individual assessment you need to do there. But I think talking about inspiring examples, like we're going to listen to from Mark Goldschmidt in a bit, and also from all the other speakers later on, it is what really helps convincing those organizations, because they see it works out, and it works out in the way they intend they intended it to do.
Yeah, and I mean, I can imagine there's first mover. I remember that when we built the Industrie 4.0 Maturity Index back in the days, there are always these companies that are a bit more innovative than the others. So talking about patterns, what kind of companies are approaching you right now? So in terms of size, sector, is that, so can you share a feeling for that?
Yeah, of course. So I think what is really important to understand if we think about upgrade circular economy, about reman, we need to think about, is the product actually designed or even worth to go through a reman process, right? So if we think about this presenter, maybe if we start about thinking about our smartphones, it could be. But if we think about huge investments and operational, for example, engines, there we have the value of the product itself is so important in regard to that. So that is one pattern. If you have a high value product, which is also designed a little bit more modularly, you can bring those upgrades into the products. And I would guess most of our talks are with I would say medium-sized company, but medium-sized, I mean up to maybe 5,000.
The 10, German Mittelstand.
Yeah, exactly. The German Mittelstand, because some of them do it naturally, because it's in their DNA, as I just said, right? We have a very inspiring exchange and project also with a company who's in the part of visual recognition, etc., for detecting products really fast. So at the moment, talking about, I'm missing the English word, Pfandflaschen. So bottles when you give them back. And that's also nice because they never thought about it and now they can explore it because they have the foundation. They thought about it because it's their understanding of how they treat the customer. If you have a very special machine from them, you get upgrades over time. They approach you. They have a strong service department, and that are maybe two patterns about companies who are going this direction.
Okay, that's very interesting. By the way, there's a question that we had on the chat, and that's a question that, to be honest, we always get it. And it's like, the question goes like this: well, there's a new topic on the horizon. In that case, it's about that dual strategy. So there's not immediate returns, but it's definitely a topic worth looking into. So how do you start the conversation with senior leadership?
Yeah, how do you start the conversation? So let me talk maybe about pitfalls on the way to start those new explorative business models. So first and foremost, you need a strong financial argumentation. If it's not on the short run, then on the long run, right?
So margin needs to be higher, even higher when you expect the returns in the next 5 years
exactly,
from now.
and maybe it's even through indirect effects, right? As I said, you buy back your engine or your phone from the market. That means, okay, the customer who just sold you the phone is going to buy a new phone. Indirect sales. Also, of course, put it into the business case because you need to get a little bit, let's say, innovative on how to calculate the business case in the beginning. So, but you need this financial communication because otherwise they don't take you serious. Then think, okay, that's just about experimentation, and I don't know, someone from the incubator came with a crazy idea. Let's see, but it feels too dangerous. Second, if you don't align with the core business, as I just said, that's key, and that's also how you approach senior leadership, show empathy, go into the role. What is their target system actually, and how does your idea support this target system? I think really important at any time, but especially in those new initiatives, and try to bring those ideas into the communication.
Okay. Thank you so much for sharing the insights. I think there's much more to discuss, yes, so please let's continue that discussion in the chat. For now, I think Mark Goldschmidt is waiting for you, so enjoy your session, enjoy your blog, and I'll see you later.
Thank you so much, Christian.